Here we go again. A nice evening stroll. The first signs of Christmas making themselves known. What are people actually celebrating? Saturnalia, of course. Yuletide. I've yet to find anything in the Holy Bible about Christmas actually being in the month of December at all. But alas, the people will celebrate Christmas because that's when they're told to celebrate it. So enjoy the pretty lights. Think about the fact that 150 years ago there wouldn't have been any sort of electricity to power the lights. So I kind of wonder exactly what people were doing at that time. I heard that the modern day image of Santa Claus was created by Coca-Cola and doesn't really represent anything biblical whatsoever. Just food for thought, shit to bring up around the table. I think when we examine biblical things, it's important to keep in mind the text has been translated, at least once, depending on what version you read. And so you have to assume that a lot of the original meaning was lost, whether intentionally or not. So I like to go into the text, sometimes via the internet, I guess, and find the original words that were used. And although I haven't done a huge deep dive on, the philosophical origins of the word, this one specific word that I'm about to bring up, I would like to speak to it in less of a biblical way and more of how I've just come to understand this universal principle of growth. I think that when we think of things in the realm of the miraculous, one thing generally comes to mind. And it's not something like winning the lottery. Because sure, even maybe a non-Christian would pray to win the lottery, but I think a lot of the time people pray for their family members to get better. If they've fallen deeply ill, if they're about to go under the knife, as it were, have a very invasive procedure done, maybe to remove a tumor or service an organ. A lot of people will find themselves, even as non-Christians, in moments of prayer. And I think it's really interesting. One thing I heard is that there's no such thing as an atheist in airplane turbulence. You'll find that a lot of people will pray to some unknown force if it comforts them, or if it gives them some sort of a sense of control. And I think that both of these things are really important to keep in mind as motivations to become attached to Source can change over time. And although it might not seem like the greatest of ideas to simply pray to a God only when it's convenient, I think it's at very least a jumping off point for people who have not even considered anything in the realm of the miraculous or in the spiritual. For people that haven't considered the expanded effects of consciousness beyond the body, the true power of visualization and the law of attraction, these sorts of things that are hard to verify. But if thought about, and truly thought about, we can understand why these things are so hard to verify. There's something to be said about, not using prayer as somewhat of a wishing well, but to use it as a way to connect yourself with the understanding of something higher. I think that prayer for wisdom and understanding is quite important. I like to think if we were to read a very complex piece of poetry for the first time without having first pre-read it, we may find ourselves failing to attribute the correct rhythm to the syllables insofar as the poem was written to rhyme, and be rhythmic, which oftentimes is the nature of a poem. If we aren't familiar with our destiny and with our path, and if we can't become familiar, by looking back at our lives, self-reflection, and truly looking within, we won't be able to know for sure exactly when and what is appropriate to ask for. And we absolutely will ask for things in the realm of absurd and lack understanding of how to make this poem rhyme out loud. There are ways to become familiar with the rhythms and the cycles of the world and how they connect to the spirit. But it requires somewhat of an open mind if one has not connected to these things in the past. So I think that people in times of crisis, it's not to say that the vulnerable are the ones that pray, but when they are truly at the end of the rope, that generally is when people turn to spirit. It's not necessarily that they turn there, but it's at least as if higher principles begin to make themselves known. A lot of people find themselves attached to the spirit by way of truth. Something doesn't feel right in the world, and so they begin to look for truth, and they find that wherever within the institutions of the world they begin to look for straight answers and truth, they cannot find it. And when you begin to see worldly things, especially our institutions, as fallible, you're definitely in a state of discomfort. I believe that it is in these extremes of the human condition, because it's not just a discomfort to find yourself without a value, having your value structure pulled out from under you, like living in this materialist, reductionist world and having all of it be a lie, for better or for worse. Like, you're not going to find yourself in a simple discomfort. You're going to be in an absolute state of chaos. I think that it is only through the destruction of a previous order, through chaos, that a new order is able to form. sure that there is a specific Latin term that accurately represents that. Maybe one comes to mind for specific people. I can't really remember it right now. But yeah, order out of chaos. It truly is miraculous when a lost sheep is found. You know, it's worth celebrating. Because when people are truly at the end of their rope and they do catch a glimpse of what is beyond, simply by means of being at the extreme of the human condition, it can be the start of an entire new process, an entire new way of living. And this is what people refer to, I think, you know, in one way or the other, as waking up or having a spiritual awakening. I think when people are beginning to experience these things, they begin on this path, you know, they begin to understand that this is a call to higher knowledge and that they have to follow this call. And oftentimes they'll fail to answer the call, but eventually they pass that first threshold where there simply is no going back. When they begin to look for teachers in this world, they can fall victim to, you know, these, I guess you could say, predatory, charismatic, spiritual leaders. People that claim to have the answers, to have it all figured out themselves. I think you have to be really, really careful, even when approaching a major institution of, you know, the major institutional religions, that you're not falling into the trap of a, false prophet, somebody that preaches things outside of the divinely inspired text, whatever that is for you. I speak specifically about the Holy Bible, because that's what I'm most familiar with, but after having read the Bible and, you know, ask questions to various preachers, and you find very little evidence to support the structure of church that we have right now in the world. It seems as though the church just may be a very dangerous thing for people to give their spirit to. You know, when one believes that they can just simply pay money for their salvation, and they dress up this man in a robe, they have him stand at the front, and he's the way that you can get to God. I have yet to find any evidence to support that. And so I tend to think that mankind has taken the word and bent it to, you know, whatever whim he's chosen. People have been using religion as a way to control the population, you know, certainly for centuries. We can see that monarchs of the world have claimed to be divinely appointed by God, one way or another. And the evidence was simply unknown to the common man, because he simply did not have access to the proper literature, or maybe didn't know even how to read. People see reading as this, like, you know, highbrow, like, classy thing, but I honestly don't think that the general population has been able to read for very long. I have a tendency to think that even teaching the general population how to read exposes them to an entire new world of propaganda and mind control, neuro-linguistic programming, which is, the brain and how it reacts to certain words, given that those certain words are repeated in similar context over and over and over again, it can affect the mind in such a way that people just become highly emotional when they hear like certain words. So you got to be really careful to not use them. I think about the invention of the printing press, and when the distribution of literature became more mainstream. When did the newspaper really, really catch on? When did things like Christmas lights really, really start being lit? When did people start believing everything that they believe today about things that are contradictory to the texts, not just of the Holy Bible, but historical texts of indigenous peoples in North America, in Europe, in the Middle East? When did people just begin to take, the institution's word for it? Or has it always been this way? That eventually something in one that was asleep, not questioning, woke up. To lose faith in the institution and to be completely without faith is to be in a state of chaos. But when you begin to seek, you may just find. I like the expression, seek and you may find, knock and the door may be answered. Ask and you shall receive. I think that all of these things have to do with a certain openness, because it is not as though that people without, it's not as though people cannot, do not want these things. But I think that there is a certain openness that goes hand in hand with somebody that not only wants it, but is willing to ask and learn in order to get it. Yo! I don't know who this is.